Thank you for joining us for this week's Messiah Minutes. I just want to thank everybody that helped with VBS last week. Just a great time to be around the kids, and we appreciate all the volunteers that came out and helped for that. Last reminder, hopefully get all the baby bottles in. If you still have a few straggling out there, please bring them back. It is the 4th of July week, so there's not going to be Wednesday night activities here at the church, so no adult service, no youth. Just enjoy your families, enjoy the 4th of July, have a great week. The church office is going to be closed Friday the 4th. And then Sunday the 6th, Ed is going to be preaching, and we're going to have a baptism Sunday. So if you know of anybody that's interested in getting baptized, please reach out to us so we can get that done for them Sunday the 6th. We're going to continue with the messages that we've been focusing on about holding, our thoughts captive. So we're going to stick back in 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. And we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. I'm going to continue to harsh on that verse and continue to stay there because I think we need to understand everything about that. So we're going to continue to dive down that road into our own thinking. The other verse we've been using is Romans 12:2. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So last week we talked about our emotions. We talked about our decisions and how our decisions and our emotions are largely determined by what's happening up here. And how if you want to change that, it requires more than just changing the behavior. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to do this differently. It requires intentional thinking, consistent thinking, and spending time doing that daily. We talked a little bit about how being transformed by the renewing of our minds is not something that automatically happens. It's not an accident that happens. You have to be intentional. It takes effort. And like I said, you have to do it. It takes work, it takes time, and it takes you deciding to make it a priority every day. So this week I want to talk a little bit about how our thoughts can kind of control our relationships. And if we're not holding those thoughts captive, then there's a chance our relationships are suffering from that. So cognitive interpretation, which it was hard enough for me to say, is just a fancy way to show, and a fancy way to kind of say how our mind explains things that happen. So how our mind explains events and situations and how it explains internally how we process it. Everything from what pops up on your news feed on your phone to maybe the passing comments of a coworker you work with, or maybe how we interpret a text from a family member. How we think about others' words and actions directly influences how we treat them and how we emotionally respond to them. So if we allow our thoughts to consistently be negative, even when let's say the person's words or behaviors are unclear, we often react in a way that can be pretty defensive. We get overly sensitive, and that hurts our relationships. So that's why, holding our thoughts captive is important, especially with how we interact with people. I want you to think about how your emotions are and how the way you think about them largely determines how you treat the people that are around you. Our thoughts kind of provide this filter that interprets what people say and what they do a certain way. And that determines our emotional response, and it determines our personal connection with that person. So I want you to think about, in all of your relationships, there's certain gaps that you have to fill in your mind if you think about it. Sometimes our minds fill in those gaps with negative assumptions. Sometimes they fill them in with negative explanations. Sometimes it's like an informational gap. We don't really have all the information we need to make a certain decision about something. It could be maybe it's a context gap. We don't really understand the context that somebody said something, or in which the context in which a certain comment was made. Other times there's kind of like a connection gap, right? Our lives, I don't know about you guys, especially with VBS, our lives get so busy that we forget to spend time together, and we kind of have this connection gap. Our thoughts are constantly filling in those gaps. Your thoughts are constantly filling in those gaps. So we have to decide whether we're going to presume the worst about something or we're going to assume the best about something. And I know that's hard to do. That's hard for me. Are we going to give this cynical, sarcastic, and distrusting explanation for someone, or are we going to be generous? Are we going to be kind and trusting with our thoughts about them? Are we going to think positive, or are we going to think negative thoughts about people? The point is that we're going to fill in these gaps regardless. So how we think about them can significantly impact our relationships with other people. Let's say I pull in the driveway and I see that my kids have left their bikes out again. My next thoughts are going to fill in that gap. I can think to myself, how could they do this? I'm on them every day. I've told them over and over to put their bikes in the garage. They don't care about their stuff, so why should I? I'm not going to get them bikes. I'm not going to take care of it for them. Or I can have a different thought. I can think differently. You know what? My kids are outside today. They weren't spending their summer break in front of a screen. They were doing something physical instead of watching TV all day. And how blessed are we that we have a garage to put our bikes in? How blessed are we that we have bikes in the first place? God is so good to us. So I can change the way I think. And I want you to think about what that's going to happen with my relationship with my kids. What I think in that moment has the power to kind of regulate that relationship. And it determines the course of the relationship and the rest of our evening. I want you to think about that. Here are some questions I want you to think about as you process this connection between your thoughts and your relationships. And I'm going to continue just to kind of ask these questions because I think it's when we start to wonder about these things, we dive more into our thoughts. So when I make assumptions about someone's intentions, do I automatically assume the best or do I normally assume the worst? When I make when I start thinking about the past with this certain person, what do I remember? Do I remember all the negative things or do I remember all the good things about the person? What story do I tell myself when I'm filling in the gaps about this person? Is it good? Is it positive? Remember, I teach from a place of conviction. These are things that hit me too. They hit me hard. I'm going to share with you a little example from my own life that just kind of happened recently. My kids were still in school. My daughter received a bad grade on her grade card. And she had worked so hard. She had worked to really get her grades up and maintain an A, B average. But one day, man, she just had a bad day. And she relaxed. And she didn't feel like giving it her best. And I think that's something we all can relate to, if I'm being honest with you. But when I saw her grades, I did what most of us parents do. I got upset. I came down on her so hard. I thought, as a parent, it's my job to teach her how important it is to always give her best, and that her whole grade suffered because she decided to take a day off. All of her hard work went right out the window because of one stupid day. It wasn't my finest moment as a parent. Because here's what I realized in my quiet time that night as I'm trying to hold my thoughts captive. God's showing me these things. And He showed me, you know what? My daughter had a bad day. And with my careless and thoughtless words, I destroyed her. Instead of all the great days and all the hard work that she did for that entire 9 weeks, I focused on the one day that was already her worst day. The one day she didn't feel good and she didn't want to work. And I took one of her worst days for that year and made it so much worse because I didn't think before I reacted. I'm ashamed. I'm still ashamed. I was ashamed. I was regretful. I went and I apologized to her for that. But the damage was already done. That's a night that I'm not going to get back. I ruined her night because I was too concerned with teaching her a lesson instead of loving her like Jesus would. Listen, I believe it's our job to teach our kids lessons. It's our job as parents to do so. We should do that. But a lesson without love is not a lesson at all. And it's not a lesson we should be teaching. The Bible actually says it's just a noisy cymbal or a clanging gong. I didn't have to apologize to my daughter. But because I spent time with Jesus holding my thoughts captive, I was able to apologize. And by doing that daily, spending time with Him daily, my relationship with my kids has greatly improved because He opens my eyes to the way I've been molded by the world around me, by the way I've been taught. I still have a long way to go. But I know I'm going to get there because I'm going there with Him. I'm going there with Christ. And I urge you to come there with me. I appreciate you guys tuning into this. Please, start spending some time with Him. Get into your own minds and let Him rework things so you can save yourself from some of the things that I've had to go through. I love you. I appreciate you. Please like and share it. We'll see you next week.